The hikers trudged through the dense fog that had swallowed the village. The air was thick, damp with a chill that seemed to seep into their bones. As they made their way down the narrow path, a feeling of unease settled over them. Emily, the first to speak, whispered, "It's too quiet here. It doesn't feel right." Michael, ever the skeptic, dismissed her concern. "It's just a ghost town, probably abandoned for years." They passed houses with cracked windows, doors ajar, as though someone had left in haste. The faint smell of something burning reached their noses. Alex, the most sensitive to the atmosphere, stopped abruptly. "Do you hear that?" The others paused, but the only sound was the rustling of leaves in the wind. Then, they all heard it, the faint sizzle of something cooking. It was coming from a house ahead, smoke rising from the chimney. A chill ran down their spines as they exchanged uncertain glances. "Should we check it out?" Sam asked, his voice wavering. Emily nodded reluctantly, and they moved toward the house, each step heavier than the last. Closer they got, the more the weight of the unknown pressed on them. What kind of village was this where food cooked but no one was around? As they ventured deeper into the abandoned village, the eerie silence stretched longer than they were comfortable with. Emily's footsteps were the loudest, echoing through the fog-filled street. "This doesn't feel like just an abandoned town," she said, her voice breaking the stillness. Michael, walking just behind her, didn't respond. "I'm doing." His eyes scanned the surroundings, trying to dismiss the unsettling feeling creeping up his spine. "Maybe it's not abandoned," Alex said, his voice low, almost as if talking to himself. "What do you mean?" Sam asked, sounding more frustrated than curious. "I mean," Alex paused, his gaze sharp as he stopped in front of a collapsed house. "What if they didn't leave? What if they're still here?" Emily stopped walking, glancing around nervously. "Are you suggesting that someone is still here?" she asked, her voice shaky. Alex nodded slowly, or something. The air felt colder, and their breath was visible in the early morning mist. As they walked, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, their every move observed by unseen eyes. The village felt even more suffocating as they moved through the twisted alleyways, their steps growing heavier with each passing moment. The houses around them were abandoned, their doors wide open, and yet there was a lingering sense of presence, as if the entire place was holding its breath. Emily suddenly stopped, her eyes catching a glimpse of something, a shadow flickering in the corner of her vision. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Michael, ever the skeptic, shook his head. "It's just your mind playing tricks on you." But even as he said the words, he glanced around, a sense of unease creeping over him. "No, something's wrong," Alex said, his voice full of certainty. "We're not alone here." Sam scoffed. "There's no one here. We're just walking through a ghost town." But Emily wasn't convinced. "It doesn't feel like that," she whispered, looking around nervously. Then, without warning, a loud bang echoed from behind one of the houses. The group froze, their hearts racing. "What was that?" Sam demanded, his voice panicked. They all exchanged worried glances, the tension in the air growing thicker by the second. The group followed the sound, moving cautiously toward its source. The path was narrow, lined with debris and broken objects. "It's coming from that house," Emily said quietly, pointing to a nearby building. "Should we go in?" Sam's response was instant. "No way, we should turn around and get out of here." But Alex was already moving toward the door, pushing it open. "We need answers," he said, his tone determined. Emily hesitated but followed him inside. The house was dark and cold, with only the faint light filtering through the cracks in the walls. As they ventured further in, the air grew thick with dust, and the smell of decay filled their noses. The house felt ancient, frozen in time, as if no one had lived there for years. "It's like the village is stuck in time," Emily said, her voice shaking as she touched a dusty chair. "Like it's waiting for something." They explored the rooms one by one, each more unsettling than the last. Finally, in the farthest room, Alex found an old journal, its pages yellowed with age. "This could be it," he said, holding it up. But before he could open it, the floorboards creaked loudly, and a shadow moved in the corner of the room. The shadow in the corner of the room shifted, and the group froze. "Did you see that?" Emily whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. Alex's hand tightened around the journal, his eyes scanning the room. "Stay close," he ordered, but his voice was steady, even as fear gripped him. Sam, his nerves frayed, looked toward the door. "We need to get out of here now." But before they could move, the shadow stepped into the light. It wasn't a person but something far worse, an entity of pure darkness, its form constantly shifting. It looked at them with hollow, empty eyes, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. "What is that thing?" Michael asked, his voice shaky. "I don't know," Alex answered, his voice low. "But we can't let it stop us." Without thinking, he threw the journal across the room, hoping to distract the entity. It lunged, but they had already bolted for the door. As they ran, the house groaned, as if the very walls were alive, chasing them, trapping them. They made it out, gasping for air, but the fog outside had thickened. The village was no longer a place of desolation. It was a prison, and they had just become its newest captives. The village felt wrong. As the group gathered around the hearth in the abandoned house, the warmth from the fire did little to ease the chill in their bones. Michael leaned against the crumbling wall, his gaze lingering on the flickering flames. "Why does everything feel so off?" he muttered. Emily, nervously wringing her hands, glanced out the window, her unease deepening. "There's something we're not seeing here." Sam, ever the skeptic, scoffed. "This is ridiculous. People leave towns all the time." But Alex, who had been silently watching the flames, spoke up. "What if they didn't leave? What if something took them?" His words hung in the air like a dark omen. The fire crackled, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist. Emily shook her head, trying to push the thought away, but the gnawing feeling in her gut refused to fade. "Maybe we should leave," she suggested, her voice barely a whisper. The others exchanged uneasy glances. No one wanted to be the first to suggest it, but deep down, they all knew the village had more secrets than they could handle. A sudden noise shattered the tense silence, a thud from somewhere deep within the house. Emily jumped, her heart racing. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Michael furrowed his brow, straining to listen. "It's probably just the house settling," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. But Sam, ever the realist, was already moving toward the door. "No, something's not right. I'm going to check it out." Alex grabbed his arm, stopping him. "Are you insane? We don't know what's here." Sam jerked away, his frustration mounting. "We've been sitting here long enough, waiting for something to happen. I'm not waiting any longer." As Sam stormed out, the others hesitated, a mixture of fear and curiosity pulling them in different directions. Emily glanced at Alex. "Do you think we should follow him?" she asked quietly. Alex hesitated, eyes narrowing. "I don't know. Something's off about this place." Despite their doubts, the group reluctantly followed Sam, unsure of what awaited them but driven by an unspoken need to understand. The group ventured deeper into the house, following the sound of the strange thud. The further they went, the darker it became, the air thick with dust and neglect. "This is a bad idea," Michael muttered, his voice low. "We should have stayed by the fire." But Alex was already at the door where the noise had come from. He pushed it open, revealing a small, cluttered room filled with old furniture covered in dust. At the center of the room stood a tall, shadowy figure, a mirror, cracked and shattered, its surface reflecting nothing but darkness. Emily stepped forward, her heart pounding. "What happened here?" she asked, but the words seemed to disappear into the air. The others remained silent, eyes fixed on the mirror, the tension in the room palpable. "This is it," Alex whispered, stepping closer. "This is what's wrong with this place." A cold breeze swept through the room, making the hairs on their necks stand on end. No one dared to move, but the eerie sensation of being watched was undeniable. The room grew colder, the unsettling silence almost suffocating. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, deeply wrong. "We need to get out of here," he urged, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now." But Emily remained fixated on the shattered mirror, her eyes scanning the cracks as if searching for something hidden. Sam rolled his eyes, his patience wearing thin. "We're not leaving just because of some broken glass," he snapped. "This place is old, that's all." Alex, however, wasn't so sure. "There's more to it than that," he said, his voice tight. "Did you feel that?" The others remained silent, each caught up in their own thoughts. But as they all stood there, the temperature dropped further, and the sound of footsteps, faint, deliberate, echoed from the darkness beyond the room. Emily turned sharply, her heart hammering. "Did you hear that?" she gasped. But when they looked, the room was empty. No one had entered. No one was there. The group moved cautiously toward the door, their every step heavy with dread. "We're not alone," Alex said suddenly, his voice low but firm. "There's something else here." Emily swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I don't want to be here anymore," she whispered. "This place is cursed." Sam shook his head, but the unease was starting to settle over him too. "We're just letting our imaginations run wild," he muttered, but there was a crack in his voice. The sound of the footsteps grew louder, and soon they could hear the unmistakable creak of floorboards. Slowly the group turned to face the empty hallway. A figure appeared, moving in the shadows, only to vanish as quickly as it came. "We need to leave," Emily insisted, her voice shaking. But no one moved. They were all frozen, their minds racing with the knowledge that whatever was here, it wasn't human. The group trudged deeper into the village, the fog growing thicker with each step. The unsettling silence was broken only by the sound of their footsteps. "Where is everyone?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. Michael turned to her, frustration in his eyes. "They're gone, Emily. There's no one left." The truth of it hit them all like a physical blow. Alex scanned the area, his eyes narrowing. "But this place, it doesn't feel abandoned. It's like they're just hiding." Sam shook his head, still unwilling to accept the situation. "There's nothing here but ghosts. We're wasting our time." But as they passed an overgrown garden, Emily stopped in her tracks. "Look," she said, pointing toward the house across the street. "There's someone in the window." The group froze. But the figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only the faintest shadow in the window. "We need to find them," Alex urged, his voice filled with urgency. The others nodded, their apprehension growing as they continued their search, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. The group approached the house, their steps slow and cautious. Emily, her heart racing, could still feel the presence of the figure in the window. "Did anyone else see that?" she asked, voice shaking. Michael nodded reluctantly. "Yeah, but it's probably just a trick of the light." Alex was less convinced. "No, I saw it too. Someone's in there." Sam, rolling his eyes, sighed in frustration. "It's probably just a reflection. Let's move on." But Emily shook her head. "No, we're not leaving until we know who's here." She approached the door, hesitant but determined. As she reached out to turn the handle, the door creaked open on its own, as if inviting them inside. The others hesitated, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. "We have to go in," Alex said quietly, his tone serious. "Whatever's going on here, we're going to find answers." The group stepped inside, the air heavy with the scent of decay. Each creak of the floorboard seemed louder than the last, as they ventured deeper into the dark house. Inside, the house was colder than the outside air, the shadows clinging to the walls. "This place feels wrong," Michael muttered, glancing around at the abandoned furniture, the shattered glass on the floor. The atmosphere was suffocating. Emily's eyes scanned the room. "There's something here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, a low thud echoed from upstairs, making them all jump. Sam frowned. "It's just the house settling. We've been hearing noises all day." But Emily wasn't convinced. "No, that was something else." Alex nodded. "We're not alone." The group hesitated, but Alex, driven by an insatiable curiosity, moved toward the staircase. "We need to find out what's upstairs." Sam groaned. "I'm not going up there. You can go, but I'm staying down here." But the rest of the group followed Alex, determined to uncover the mystery. As they ascended the creaking stairs, the oppressive silence grew heavier, almost unbearable. Each step felt like it was echoing in the void, the fear of the unknown building with each moment. At the top of the stairs, the group found a long hallway. The floor was covered in dust, and the walls were lined with old portraits, whose eyes seemed to follow them as they moved. "This place is a nightmare," Sam said, his voice tight with anxiety. "We need to get out of here before it gets worse." But Emily wasn't listening. She had stopped in front of one particular painting, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch it. "Look," she said, her voice trembling. The painting depicted a man, his face eerily familiar. Michael stepped forward, squinting. "That's the same face from the window," he whispered. Alex looked closer, his heart racing. "No, it's not possible." But as he reached out to touch the painting, the door at the end of the hallway suddenly slammed shut, echoing through the house. The sound reverberated in their ears as they jumped, fear surging through them. "We need to go," Michael said urgently. But the door remained closed, and they were trapped. The door at the end of the hallway rattled, shaking as if something was trying to get through. "We're not alone," Emily gasped, backing away from the door. Michael, his heart racing, tried the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. "We're trapped," he said, panic creeping into his voice. Sam's voice was low, filled with anger. "This is insane. This is just a game to whoever's messing with us." But Alex wasn't listening. His eyes were focused on the door, the rattling growing louder. "This isn't a game," he said. "Whatever it is, it's real." The rattling stopped suddenly, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. Then, without warning, the door swung open. An old gust of wind rushed into the hallway, making the group stumble back. They didn't hesitate this time. They ran. But the house seemed to shift around them, the walls closing in. As they reached the stairs, Emily looked back one last time, the shadow of a figure standing in the doorway, watching them. The group stood outside the door that had swung open before them, their breaths heavy in the cold, damp air. The once familiar house now felt like an alien world, a place that wasn't meant to be entered. "This isn't just a house," Alex murmured, his voice tinged with disbelief. "It's a prison." Emily shivered, her heart pounding in her chest. "But who's trapping us here?" she whispered, her voice thick with fear. Michael, ever the realist, shook his head. "There's no one here. It's just a broken-down house, nothing more." But Sam wasn't so sure anymore. "We can't keep ignoring everything that's happening. It's like the house wants us here." Alex stepped forward, determination in his eyes. "We've come this far. There's something inside, and we're going to find out what it is." The others reluctantly followed him down the narrow corridor, the air growing colder with each step. The walls seemed to close in, and the silence was deafening. The only sound was the creak of the floorboards beneath their feet. The air grew colder as they ventured deeper into the house. The walls were covered in strange faded symbols, some appearing to move when they weren't looking directly at them. "What is this?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael frowned. "Graffiti. Old stuff. Nothing to worry about." But even he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Alex was the first to notice the door at the far end of the hall. It was closed, but something about it drew him in. "We need to check that room," he said, his voice low. Sam, reluctant but now too frightened to argue, followed silently. As they reached the door, the temperature dropped even further, their breath visible in the air. Alex reached for the doorknob. The door creaked as it slowly opened, revealing a room full of old, dusty furniture. The air was thick with the scent of mildew, and the only light came from the dim glow of the windows. But what caught their attention was the large mirror hanging on the wall. It was pristine, unlike the rest of the room, and it was reflecting none of them. The group stepped into the room, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The mirror at the far end of the room gleamed, untouched by time, while everything else was covered in dust. "This doesn't make sense," Michael muttered, his eyes fixed on the mirror. "How is this place so clean?" Emily took a cautious step forward, her eyes locked on the reflection. "Look," she said softly. "It's not reflecting us." The others turned to look, their faces pale with fear. The mirror reflected nothing but darkness. There was no sign of their own images, no faint outline of their shapes. Alex stepped closer to the mirror, his hand reaching toward it. It's like it's alive," he whispered. Suddenly, the reflection rippled, distorting like water. Emily gasped, taking a step back. "What is happening?" Sam asked, his voice shaky. Before anyone could respond, the mirror rippled again, and a face began to form in its depths, a face they recognized all too well. The face in the mirror was their own, or something like it. It was twisted, distorted, eyes wide with fear, yet it didn't move in sync with their own reflections. "That's not us," Emily said, her voice trembling. "It can't be." Sam backed away, his heart racing. "This is crazy. We need to get out of here now." But Alex, entranced by the mirror, couldn't tear his gaze away. "There's something trying to tell us something," he said softly. "We need to figure out what this means." As he stepped closer to the mirror, the figure's face contorted into a silent scream. The group froze, unable to look away. The mirror began to pulse with an unnatural light, and the air grew thick with dread. Emily reached out to pull Alex back, but as she touched his arm, the room seemed to spin. The walls shifted, and the door they had come through disappeared. "We're trapped," Michael said in disbelief. "We're not leaving this house, are we?" The room seemed to close in around them as the air thickened, suffocating them with its oppressive presence. "We need to get out of here," Emily shouted, panic evident in her voice. The mirror continued to pulse, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Alex, shaking now, stepped back from the mirror, his eyes wide with horror. "We can't leave," he whispered. "The house won't let us." Sam, desperate, charged toward the door, only to find that it was gone. "No! No, no, no!" he shouted, pounding his fists against the wall. The mirror reflected nothing but blackness now, the silence deafening. Michael turned toward Alex, his voice low. "What are we supposed to do now?" Alex didn't have an answer. As the darkness around them grew, they realized they weren't alone anymore. A shadow moved across the floor, and then another. They turned in unison, only to face the growing darkness where they could feel eyes watching them. The shadows in the room grew longer, stretching toward the group like dark fingers reaching for them. Emily's breath hitched as the darkness seemed to pulse with life. "We can't just stand here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Michael, his hands shaking, finally spoke up. "What are we even supposed to do? How do we get out of this?" Alex turned toward him, his expression grim. "We have to face it. Whatever's in this house, it's not going to let us leave unless we confront it." Sam stepped forward, his eyes darkened with frustration and fear. "Confront it? What do you mean? There's nothing we can do." Emily shook her head. "No, there has to be a way. We can't just give up." A low, guttural sound echoed from the walls, vibrating through their bones. The figure in the mirror was no longer an abstract shape. It was real, and it was moving toward them. "It's coming," Alex said, his voice filled with cold realization. "And we have no choice but to face it head on." The mirror flickered again, the surface rippling as if it were water. A dark figure appeared within, its outline growing clearer with each passing second. The figure was tall, its features sharp and indistinct, but its eyes glowed with an unnatural light. "It's coming for us," Sam said, his voice rising in panic. "We need to run." But Alex, more resolute than ever, stepped forward. "Running won't work. It will follow us wherever we go." Emily reached for Alex, her fingers trembling. "What do we do then?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Alex's gaze never left the mirror. "We fight. We don't have a choice. The figure in the mirror began to move toward them, its form shifting, its eyes locked onto theirs. It was almost within reach. The air grew thick with an oppressive, suffocating energy, making it hard to breathe. "Get ready," Alex said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "It's now or never." Suddenly the mirror shattered with a loud, ear-splitting crack. The dark figure lunged forward, its form taking on a more solid shape, its mouth opening wide in a silent scream. The group stumbled back, fear surging through them. "It's here," Emily cried out, but Alex pushed forward, refusing to back down. "Stay close," he ordered. The shadowy figure reached for them, its hand outstretched, but before it could touch them, the house seemed to groan. The walls shifted, the floor trembled beneath their feet, and the entire house seemed to come alive. "We can't fight it here," Michael said urgently. "We need to get out." But Alex wasn't listening. "No, we end this now." The group fought against the pull of the darkness, their footsteps heavy on the creaking floor. With every step, they could feel the house fighting back, as if it didn't want them to leave. But they kept moving, heading for the only door that hadn't vanished. They had to make it out before the darkness consumed them completely. The darkness seemed to stretch forever as they ran down the hallway, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The walls shook again, the sound of the house groaning and creaking as if it were alive. "Where's the door?" Emily shouted, her voice rising in panic. But before anyone could respond, they saw it, the doorway at the end of the hall. It was glowing faintly, a small sliver of light in the overwhelming darkness. "We have to reach it," Alex urged, his voice tight with urgency. But as they neared, the shadowy figure appeared in front of them, blocking their path. It had no form, just an oppressive presence that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. "Get away from us," Michael yelled, his voice shaking. But the figure didn't respond. It didn't need to. The group was frozen, trapped in its grip. Alex clenched his fists, a fierce determination filling him. "We're getting out of here, together." With a final desperate push, Alex lunged forward, grabbing the doorknob and wrenching it open. The house seemed to fight him, the air growing heavier, as if it were trying to close in around them. But Alex didn't stop. He pulled the others through the door, into the blinding light beyond. For a moment, they were free. The house, the shadows, all of it behind them. But as they stepped outside, the world they had known felt distant, distorted. The ground beneath their feet wasn't the same. The air was thick with a strange, unsettling fog, and the sky above them was dark and swirling. Emily turned to Alex, her voice trembling. "Where are we?" But Alex didn't have an answer. They had escaped the house, but the nightmare wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The group trudged forward through the thickening fog. "What is this place?" Emily asked, looking around nervously. "We need to stay together," Alex said, leading the way. Michael didn't respond but scanned their surroundings, still unconvinced. "It's worse than I thought," Alex muttered, feeling the heavy, suffocating air. Sam growled, "We need answers." The fog closed in further, suffocating them with its grip. Every step felt like they were being drawn deeper into something unnatural. "Over there," Emily said, pointing to a decaying building in the distance. "That's where we need to go." Alex nodded, eyes narrowing. "I think we're close." As they approached, the air grew colder, and the fog thicker. "It's like the village is keeping us here," Sam muttered, unease rising. Alex hesitated but pushed forward, driven by the need to uncover the truth. "We don't stop until we find out what's really going on." The group entered the dark, musty room. "This place, it feels like it's been waiting for us," Emily whispered. Alex opened an old chest and found a journal, covered in dust. "This could be it," Alex said, flipping through the pages filled with cryptic symbols. Sam looked over, concern in his voice. "What does it mean?" But Alex shook his head. "I don't know, but we need to figure it out. It's connected to everything." "Something's happening," Michael said, staring at the stone pedestal. The journal Alex held seemed to glow faintly. We need to destroy whatever's causing this, Alex said, his voice filled with urgency. But the room began to tremble, the walls shifting. We're too late, Sam said, panic creeping into his voice. As the figure appeared, the air felt even thicker. We have no choice now, Alex said. We fight. The group ran, but the walls closed in around them, and the stone figure pursued them relentlessly. We need to get out, Emily shouted. We can't stop now, Alex urged. Finally, in a desperate move, Alex hurled the stone across the room, shattering it. The figure screamed, and the walls seemed to crumble. The group ran toward the open door, but the tower's destruction wasn't over. They fled into the blinding light beyond, escaping the collapsing tower. The group stood before the towering stone structure, a sense of finality in the air. The ominous fog rolled around them, tightening with every step. We have to finish this, Alex said, his voice firm. Whatever is behind this, it ends here. Emily hesitated but nodded. We can't go back. Sam grumbled, but the resolve in his eyes was undeniable. They approached the stone door, ancient symbols glowing faintly. This is it, Alex said. This is the source. Alex reached for the stone door, feeling a sudden surge of energy. As his hand touched the symbols, they lit up, and the door groaned open. It's waiting for us, Emily said, her voice trembling. They stepped into the dark interior. The air was thick with tension. This place feels wrong, Sam muttered. We have no choice, Alex replied, stepping forward into the unknown. Inside, the room was lined with ancient bookshelves, and a pedestal stood in the center with a glowing black stone. This is it, Alex said, his voice tense. We destroy it, we end this. Emily took a hesitant step forward, but the ground trembled beneath them. What if it's a trap? Sam asked, his voice full of dread. But Alex was already moving, reaching for the stone. We'll find out. As Alex touched the stone, the room shook violently. A dark figure appeared, its eyes glowing with malevolence. You should not have come, it whispered. The stone began to pulse with an ominous red light, and the walls seemed to close in. We have to destroy it, Alex shouted. But the figure blocked their way, and the group was trapped. The room seemed alive, shifting with an ancient power. With one final effort, Alex hurled the stone into the wall, shattering it into pieces. The dark figure screamed as the tower shook violently. The walls cracked and the group ran, barely escaping the collapsing structure. Is it over? Emily gasped, her heart racing. No, Alex replied. It's just begun. The fog thickened around them, and the village seemed to pulse with dark energy. They had escaped the tower, but the nightmare was far from over.